Okay, now let's look at validating a potential cluster configuration. Now we're looking at failover clustering here, not network load balancing clusters. So just so you know what we're looking at. Now you need to install the failover cluster feature. It's a feature, not a role. You'll need to install it on both servers. And I've already got it installed on two of my servers. If you remember from other videos we've been doing here, I've got a domain controller and then two domain members, DM1 and DM2. I've already installed it so we didn't have to wait for it, but let me show you where it's at. It's going to be in Manage, Add Roles and Features, and we're not selecting a role here. We're going to skip that, and we're going to come to Features, and we're going to find the failover clustering. And then we install that. That takes a couple of minutes. Now, once we get that installed, the next step is to open up our failover cluster manager. So we're going to validate a configuration. Now, we've got three options here, same three down here. Validate a configuration, which you want to do before you create a cluster. You can also validate a configuration later on as well, once cluster is up and running, but we want to validate it before we try to create the cluster. Then we have the option to create the cluster, and last of all, we have the option to connect to an existing cluster. Now, a couple of things that I want you to be aware of. Number one, if you're going to cluster servers together, they need to be really, really similar. Hardware wise, software wise, similar roles, similar features. So they need to be very, very similar in order for it to cluster well. Now, I have also had issues with clustering, creating problems for me if I have servers that have been up and running for a while. If I try to build a cluster between a domain controller, a domain member, I've sometimes had issues with that. So the cleaner the systems are, the easier clustering gets set up. So the ideal here is if you want to build a cluster, take new servers, pretty much align them hardware and software wise, make clustering one of the first things you do with them. And once you get them clustered, then you can load the clusterware applications. But if you've done a bunch of other stuff on the servers, sometimes clustering will create problems for you. All right, let's validate a configuration. And I want to validate a configuration. You can do this with just one server, by the way. It's kind of hilarious. But I'm going to include both my Bassett 301-DM1, and it's going to try to validate connected there, and then Bassett 301-DM2. And both of these are brand new, like I literally spun them up on virtual machines less than an hour ago. So I'm going to click Next, and we're going to try to run some validation tests. Now, the recommended one is to run all tests. You can choose to run only selected tests. And typically that's going to be you run all tests and it comes up with a few warnings you decide you want to fix. So you straighten that out and then you can come back and run just those selected tests. But I'm going to go ahead and run all of them because I haven't done this yet. So I'm going to run all and click Next. And here it's going to show what tests are pending. It's going to show what's currently in process. It's going to show what tests have passed, what percentage these are at. And this will take a few minutes because it's not only doing the server that you are on, it's reaching across the network to do the other server as well. So this runs them against all servers simultaneously. So be aware that this will take a while, which is why we have that option on the previous one to say, hey, I don't want to run all tests. Just give me a few of them and the ones that I know I have issues with, and I'll be good with that. Okay, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and let this run for a few minutes, and I'm going to pause the video, and I will pick it up when we're done with our validation test. Okay, so our testing took a few minutes. It is all completed. As we scroll through this here, we'll see some things are validated, some things were successful. So scroll on down, I'm going to see some of them have warnings. There we go. So valid IP configuration, I've got a warning. If I click on view report, This is actually going to show me a lot more detail. And this is where I can see any challenges that I have. And I can save this and come back and review it at a later date. I can also say, all right, I want to look at these. All the by drivers signed. I had a warning there. Show me that. And it's going to show you the more detailed information. So I can take that report and go and work on fixing some of these issues. I can also choose to create a cluster now using the validated nodes. Now, it says you should review some warnings of the report, cluster solution only if the cluster, all cluster validation tests succeed with or without warnings. That's the kicker here. You can do it if you have warnings. You can go ahead and create a cluster. If you have warnings, just be aware that it might create challenges for you a little bit later on. If you have anything that failed, then you can't build a cluster off of it. All right, as we scroll on down here, here's the results summary. Here are some of the warnings that were listed. Notice this is not as nice as the view report, and you can't really save it. Okay, at this point, I'm not going to build a cluster using this. We might come back and build a cluster using the create cluster, which actually is going to give us a little more options. So I'm going to click finish, and we are done with validating a cluster configuration.